meeting off. We'll call to order the meeting, which is now June 27th, 2023. This regular meeting postponed from last week of the Providence City Plan Commission. It is 5:01. We'll call this meeting to order. Let's go around and take a roll call, starting with Noel.
Noel Sanchez.
Will Sherry,
Turn on your mic, enter.
Miguel Casada,
Web Simon, staff.
Sharon Herner, legal counsel.
Is our staff.
All right. It's a little bit of a hybrid meeting today. Bob's joining us remotely, and I think it'll still run smoothly. And Choyan is on vacation, a well-deserved vacation. So we have first order of business is to approve the minutes from the May 16th, 2023 meeting. I hope you all have received and reviewed and read those minutes. If there are any edits, we should discuss them now if anyone cares to make a motion to approve them. All right, we have a motion and we have a second. So I'll just do a voice vote, yay or nay. All in favor, yay?
Yay.
Yay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes pass. The next item of business is the election of the commission secretary. Bob, would you like to introduce this?
Sure, Mr. Chair. So we do have a vacancy in the position of secretary. This is the person who keeps the signs the minutes. The minutes are typically prepared by the recording secretary. That's Choyan. So this is the person who sort of reviews them and ensures that they're correct. We do not necessarily have a preference about who that should be, although it should not be Chair Gazdaco or Vice Chair Verdi. So we've got three others. It could be either one. If there's anyone who would like to volunteer to take on that very important duty.
Well,
Is that the only duty?
That's the duty.
that is the primary duty, is signing the minutes. You are, but you're listed as the
secretary.
The secretary, yes. So it's an important role. We need to have a secretary.
I'll do it if nobody else wants.
Will, Miguel, I feel like we're twisting arms here.
Just keep better notes
So
of my own.
Noel we have a nomination of Noel Sanchez, a self-nomination. Do we have any others? We have a second?
second nomination.
All right, Miguel, we have a second. All in favor of Noel Sanchez acting as the secretary for the Providence City Plan Commission, say aye. Aye. All right, and you are our new secretary. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yay. Let's get it over with.
And with that, we'll go to the director's report. Direct.
Okay, so just a couple of items here. I'm happy to report that we've got a couple of new nominations by the mayor for members of the City Plan Commission. They will be considered by the Finance Committee tomorrow night, and with any luck at next month's meeting, we'll have a full complement of 7 commission members. So stay tuned on that. Next, I'd like to say that we had a really good kickoff meeting for the comprehensive plan a couple of days ago at the Providence Career and Technical School. We had close to 150 members of the public who showed up and sort of gave us a lot of feedback. We had good representation from all throughout the city. We had many members of the city council show up. So we see Commissioner Sherry there. If anybody else was there and I missed you, I apologize, but it was a really good meeting just to sort of lay out some of the basic questions about the comprehensive plan and the direction we want to take as a city, and it went very well. So that's just the beginning of this process. We have an online presence, so please check that out, members of the public, and also look for meetings that we'll be having throughout the city during the summer and into the fall. And of course, we'll be reporting to you, the commission, each month as we work through this, and there will be a lot of opportunity for you to weigh in as well.
Wonderful, thank you. With that, we will jump right into the first agenda item, which is a minor subdivision, case number 23-037 MI. Address is 572 Elmwood Ave. The applicant is 103 Evergreen LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a subdivision, minor subdivision. It's one lot that's being subdivided into two lots. This is in the C2 zoning district. There are no minimum lot sizes in this district, but we do have to be aware of a couple of issues, namely setbacks and ensuring that there's enough parking on the lot that contains the building. The subdivision would create one vacant lot and then one lot that has a building on it. And we have worked with our zoning official and with the applicant to ensure that there's adequate parking and that there are adequate setbacks with this. So this is a subdivision that is perfectly as of right, as we lay out in the staff report. So with that, there's the attorney for the applicant is here as well to
Attorney Conley is here. You want to take it from there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought the presentation from the city was spot on. I don't have much to add. It's a by right subdivision. We've complied with all dimensional requirements. If the city, the current owner is working with the interested buyer, and that's what the subdivision is really driven by.
Right. Mr. Chair, I should have said something earlier, but just to, sorry, my mic wasn't on. Just to enter into the record, I attended a meeting as a resident, a neighborhood meeting, where at least one, if not the only tenant that's going to be there presented to the neighborhood, and I did attend that. It was not with the owner. I don't think it's applicable to the subdivision, but I did want to enter that to the record and make sure that was okay.
We'll get some legal advice on that.
Yes, he has discussed it with me and I agree. We just wanted to be transparent and make sure that it was on the record.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that forthcomingness, Miguel. All right, commissioners, do you have anything for the representative of the applicant before we hear the staff report?
Is there a plan for the second lot for the parking?
No, at this time, it's just to separate and have a vacant lot. It's really to structure the financial ability of the incoming building owner to be able to have the financial wherewithal to perform what they wanted to perform prior to us acquiring the property.
So there's two owners, or one owner involved, but there's a person who was also interested.
Yeah, so essentially we purchased the property, and upon purchase, a nonprofit reached out and they explained that they had been trying to purchase the property, but were unable to, and could this is us back
Purchase the house,
the building,
the building. And there's no plan for the parking lot.
not as yet.
And if you could just clarify a little more, so are you saying that they're just gonna purchase the first property and then you're gonna do something with the second property, and that's why you need to subdivide it so that it goes to another use, or?
Yes, that's my understanding, but I can't speak to any other use. It's basically the way that the difference between what they were financially able to afford in terms of acquiring a property and what the value of the property was originally worth is roughly this vacant lot. So by subdividing it, we bring it within the financial wherewithal of the nonprofit. We maintain the value of the vacant lot. There's no concrete idea on what's going to happen with that vacant lot, but it was kind of a way to meet everyone halfway.
Thank you.
Understood. Thank you for that clarification, Attorney Conley.
So I don't know if this is a question for the attorney, but so the new lot will then be in the residential area, which is also covered by the historic district. Well, it'll be right next to it.
Maybe.
Is that gonna go into the historic district?
Actually, the building is, right?
Yes,
The current building is already in the historic district.
and it will stay subject to historic district overlay, and I believe it's C2 zoning.
Right.
And the new parcel will not, or the new parcel will?
Will,
Okay, so it'll still be in that historic district overlay?
correct,
Okay,
But as
And it will still be zoned commercial.
C2.
I mean, if you're subdividing a lot that's all wholly C2, the two parcels would end up being C2, and it's,
But I believe across the street and is now starts a residential area.
It does
And it
abut,
falls into a residential area right in front.
correct.
The zone jogs around the property,
correct.
according to the map here.
Yep,
Right.
that is correct. Any other questions for the applicant? And we can hear from Bob. He can give us the staff report and lay out all of the findings we need to hear.
Yeah, there'll be a shared driveway easement and all that.
No, actually, we can operate separately, is my understanding. There may be a shared driveway because of the current curb cut for a time period, but over time, we'll be able to operate separately.
It's not required to put in for any note about that in the record.
I don't believe so. Bob, what's your opinion?
No, it would just be a condition when the property is developed that if a curb cut is necessary, that it would have to be located. And the way this is, this curb cut sort of will straddle this lot line. So, it's possible that they could avail themselves of a shared driveway, but they don't have to. It really, it depends on what the proposed use is for the vacant lot, and we just don't know that at this point.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant, or should we hear the staff report? We can always reserve our right to ask Attorney Conley questions after the staff report as well. All right, Bob, take it away.
Okay, so first of all, the findings that you have to make, 5 findings. First is consistency with the comprehensive plan. This is in an area that the future land use map has designated for neighborhood, commercial, and mixed-use development. This is compliant with the zoning ordinance, both in terms of the use on the property and all of the dimensional requirements. They have ensured that they meet the parking requirement for the use here of the existing building. It's called group quarters. We don't expect that there will be any significant negative environmental impacts. The lots will both be buildable, and they will both have adequate street access for vehicles and pedestrians. So based on this discussion, we advise that you should approve the preliminary plan, finding it to be in conformance with the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan, subject to 2 conditions. Number 1, the validity of the preliminary plan should be extended to 1 year from the date of recording of the approval letter. This has been requested by the applicant in writing. And number 2, that final plan approval should be delegated to Department of Planning and Development staff.
Right, thank you, Bob. With that, this is a public meeting, so we will open it up to public comment at this time. If there's anyone here in the room who would like to speak, we'll call you up. And if you're joining us virtually, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in. *9 if you're calling in, or raise your virtual hand at the bottom middle section of your screen. All right. There is a virtual hand. So Attorney Conley will have you go over there. We have someone in the audience and we will need to use that. All right, we'll start here in the audience. Please come up to the call it a podium, but it's a seat with a microphone. And make sure to speak into the microphone. Start out by stating your name and your address for the record, and then go ahead and make your comments.
My name is Doug Victor. I live at 103 Princeton Avenue. It's in the Elmwood neighborhood, and I chair the Elmwood and South Providence Crime Watch, and have been doing so for at least a decade, maybe more. So when I hear language like this satisfies the requirements of all parties, there's one party that is left out, and that is the neighborhood. That is a neighborhood voice in these kinds of decisions, these very important decisions, even though this is a smaller decision by this body, it will impact the neighborhood in ways that are unforeseen. Without knowing what is coming into what would become the vacant lot, that leaves this section on the side street into the residential district, an open C2 potential for who knows what might come in there. To look also into the future of the integrity of 572 Elmwood Avenue, I also believe that it is important to keep this lot undivided, this existing lot undivided for projected future uses of that building. We have people who come in and they occupy buildings for a short period of time, and they make changes like this, and then they leave. And it makes these buildings less desirable to other people coming in the future. We have seen it manifest in this direction historically on Broad Street, where there is more commercial ventures, and there's not enough parking. And in the past on Broad Street, if there were more parking in the backs of some of the buildings that got created earlier on, some of them are doing that now, but not many, to help with that traffic congestion in that commercial district. Now, there is also a school, Sophia Academy, across the street from this would be unassigned, undetermined use vacant lot. And that is also a concern. In the South Side, we have had to bear the brunt of overpopulation of services for segments of the population that need to be shared out more equitably across the city and the state. The South Side has taken on, and the result of that is it impacts our economy, and it also impacts the type of businesses that come in. Many of us do not even have a close by grocery store to shop at. So we need the right kind of businesses. And I think this body needs to bear in mind, as you're making this decision and others, that it's really critical to think about the supportive and viable future of neighborhoods like the Elmwood neighborhood that has historically been marginalized, historically been underfunded, and has a lot of catching up to do. And in my role as chair of the organization that I am chair of, I have worked steadily and consistently to help build the type of infrastructure and create the kinds of pleadings for policies and procedures, both here and at the city council and some of the other city meetings, to advocate for a better future. I think this subdivision is going in the wrong direction. It's the wrong direction. We do not know the future use. I think if there was an identified future use, that could be put out before the neighborhood, and the neighborhood could say, give it a nod or not. I have a big concern about a C2 coming into a residential street. Leave it on Broad Street, leave it on Elmwood Avenue, excuse me, leave it on Elmwood Avenue, leave it intact. And for the future use of that building, an intact lot, one lot, as it stands today, I believe will service the future of that property and Elmwood Avenue and the neighborhood of Elmwood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We had someone joining us online, I believe.
Correct. Somebody else.
Oh, we have someone else here from the audience, so we'll take you again, sir. Thank you, Miguel. I didn't see him over
Yes.
my back. I didn't say this before, the first comment, we have a pretty extensive agenda tonight, so let's keep the comments on the item we're hearing tonight. And try to limit your comments to about 2 or 3 minutes max.
Okay.
Thank you. Start your name and your address for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is Ward Weathers. My address is 150 Lexington Avenue.
Thank you.
Okay, so the property 572 Elmwood, it's in the historic district has been noted. It's the John Howe Joseph Metcalf House. And it contributes to the National Historic District and of course is protected by the local historic district overlay. I share Doug's concerns about an incursion of the commercial district into the residential nature of that neighborhood to allow commercial frontage on Atlantic would definitely change the neighborhood. And I understand that the staff report says that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, but I'm surprised by that. I can't imagine that the comprehensive plan foresaw having a commercial property there in the midst of residences. The structure has been a residence, a funeral home, an office building, and it's also been most recently an alcoholic rehab center. Adaptive reuse is essential to the flexibility of the viability of this historic structure. And to me, looking at the plan, the parking configuration doesn't look very practical. Maybe it works for group home, but the driveway looks like it shoehorns in the people that are parked in the four spots inside the structure. So I imagine that people will be parking on the streets generally, which is already kind of a crowded spot. But it also, by limiting the parking to that little area, you're gonna basically preclude future reuse of the building if whatever the current reuse is gonna be changes. And there was some allusion earlier to the nonprofit that is looking to occupy that space. There's presently a proposal to convert 572 Elmwood into a shelter, and to do so would require approval from its abutters. So if you subdivide this property, you actually move the property line, which decreases the voices of the people that currently have standing, because the standing rule gives you, it's what, 200 feet from the edge of the property. So you're going to cut out the voices of the number of people in the neighborhood in terms of the future reuse. And I suspect that's part of what's going on here. So I have a lot of concerns about this, and not knowing what's going to go in there. I encourage the commission to say no. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in the audience who would like to speak on this matter? Not, we'll go to our virtual waiting room.
We do have one hand up in the virtual waiting room.
Okay. All right, we're promoting the individual with their hand raised. If you would please state you can unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record, please. What is the?
Sure. Yep.
Oh, hello.
Can you
There
hear
you
me?
are. Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Thanks. My name is Paula Donovan. I live at 67 Lenox Avenue, which is in Ward 9, Councilman Pichardo's ward. And I am speaking in opposition to this subdivision. I'm not sure what the requirements are for informing all of the abutting property owners about this proposal. But it is my understanding that people who live close to this property were not informed about this proposal. They did not receive any written notification. So that's one concern. Also, too, I would just like to reiterate what Ward Weathers mentioned about it seems presumptive to subdivide this property without knowing what is going to be on that second lot, but also because the community itself is still having conversations around the placement of the shelter transitional housing on the lot in its entirety. And I would say I've been to 2 or 3 meetings about this proposal for the transitional housing, and there has never been any mention of subdividing this lot during the course of those conversations. So on that basis, without knowing what the future plans are, or if even in the final analysis, if the transitional housing is located there, that is still unknown. So again, I would say it's presumptive to subdivide the lot for a potential buyer when that has not yet been concluded. So those are my remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else in our virtual world who would wish to speak on this? All right. And with that, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. There were quite a few things that were brought up here. I'll address a few of them, but I want to first start with notification. Maybe I can ask Attorney Conley what the required notification is and if it was submitted.
I know that the application is compliant with all notification requirements. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to be here this evening. I can't speak to exactly what they are off the top of my head. Perhaps staff.
Yes, sir. Please comment.
Yeah, so minor subdivisions require notice on the public agenda posting at the public building where the meeting is and with the city clerk's office. There is no requirement for notice to abutters unless there is an application for zoning relief as well.
Okay. All right, so notification is simply posting. There's no required abutter notification. I will say, to speak to a lot of the concerns that were raised here in not knowing what's going to go into parcel B, you have a lot more safeguards with this parcel than any other normal subdivision that comes before us, because you are in a historic district and that will carry through. So there will be notification for whatever changes are made to the exterior of either parcel A or parcel B, because it all has to come in front of the Historic District Commission. There is notification required for that. There is public notice, and a normal subdivision by right that's not in a historic district, that could potentially not happen if it's a by right development, say a 2-family house on this C2 lot, or something that doesn't need any dimensional relief or any major land development or minor land development hearings here at the planning board. So I think the concerns, while understandable, you're actually in a much better position. Not that this makes you feel better. than most people that come in front of us and are worried about what will go in front of in this subdivided lot, because there is a level of review and public hearing for whatever happens to this lot beyond today's meeting. So that's one item. The second item is that we as the planning board, we have to act, we are bound by the land use regulations that are put into place. This is a by right subdivision. Land use is set at the city level, which includes the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. Unfortunately, sometimes that is in conflict with developments that come before us that are also have concerns from community members around that. Right now, we're in the perfect time to change how things are heard or items that may be of concern to you, because we're going through the once in a decade comprehensive plan redraw, which allows you to be involved in what the comprehensive plan will be in the next 10 years. So I implore you to join some of these meetings, give your input on the comprehensive plan, the things that concern you about potential developments in your area and throughout the city, and how we hear land use development projects. That all is on the table with this comprehensive plan rewrite, along with any other changes that may come down from the state level. And again, as far as standing goes, there was some discussion about that. If there is a Historic District Commission meeting, notification will be sent out to abutters, I believe, within 200 feet radius. But obviously, if your neighbors get notification, anyone is allowed to join in to a public meeting on a development that's going to happen, either at the planning board level or at the HDC level, and your comments will be taken into consideration. But as far as I could tell, this is a by right subdivision, and we're bound by that, by the land use regulations that we are here to see.
Couple of questions.
From the crowd, actually.
The public comment section is actually, it's done, so we have to, this is deliberations with the board level. We can't take any more public comment on this matter.
So I wanted to add something. You mentioned you asked a question about if they had notified the abutting residents, which they do not, because the minor development, but subdivision, but
Minor
also,
subdivision, yes.
but that also applies to public engagement. So in terms of having a meeting, they're not, we encourage it, but it's not required by the applicant either. So I just wanted folks to know and understand that's what is
That's
currently on
the land use regulations that they're abiding by, yes.
But I had a couple of things. One was so was it the development review regulations? If something is if the property falls under the auspices of the historic commission, aren't they supposed to get clearance from that before they come to us?
That's a good question, Bob. I don't believe so, because there's no modification to the exterior of this
Right, the 10%,
building.
right? So that's if it's 10% or more, right, of a building, they would, but in this case, because they didn't get the opportunity, right, to look at this in a state. I don't know if that's what they would even want to do, but they didn't get to look at the property with this land and decide whether the estate was something that they wanted to keep intact or not. To at least review that as a,
Bob, would you like to chime in on that?
So what you're describing is not required. The City Plan Commission could ask the Historic District Commission for an advisory opinion. However, that would typically come if there are historic appurtenances on the property that might be affected, or the integrity of some sort of historic estate might come into play.
and that's kind of that's what I'm leading to. Is if you look at this as an estate, because you're looking at a large building, which a decent size, lot, especially for the city. once that's taken away, it does change the integrity of that as an estate.
I understand, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know that I agree with you, considering that from my point of view, this is all impacted already previously from previous developments. There's no historic structures there. Is it a paved area now?
The subject area is essentially completely paved. We're proposing no alterations at all. It's really just functionally the creation of the invisible line, which subdivides the lots.
So it's a paved lot right now, which really has no historic character to it. So I don't believe that the Historic District Commission would have any opinion on the subdivision of this for the historical character of the paved lot. If it was a building that had, if there was a stone wall that ran across it, they may have at that point, and I would definitely say maybe we should get their opinion. I don't know that a paved lot rises to that level.
Well, have there been any demolition permits for like a carriage house or something on that spot?
Again, that would have to be approved by the Historic District Commission. Demolition does as well.
Right.
And so the zoning must remain C2. It can't be, that's beyond our
They would have
powers.
to,
They would have
they
to
would have to apply for something.
apply, yeah, they would have to petition the city council for a zone change if they wanted to change it.
Residential. Yeah.
Yes,
And maybe Sharon can, there's usually an order for that, right? They have to get the subdivision first and then do the zoning change or zone change the entire property.
is your mic on? I just want to make sure everyone can hear you.
Yeah, they would have.
Your mic's on.
I'm sorry, did you hear me? They'd have to request a zone change from city
But
council.
after the subdivision, or they would have to change the entire property and then subdivide in order to change it, right?
Either way,
So,
if you subdivide it, it's still gonna be C2,
right.
both lots.
Mhm.
So if you wanted to change that area, you'd have to go in front of city council.
Right, so you have to either change the entire parcel now and then subdivide to whatever it would be then, or they can take that second lot as another step later on to change the zoning, which probably wouldn't be the case because C2 has everything under that, so.
Right.
It's a more beneficial
Yes,
use.
to keep it. So I mean, to your point earlier, I mean, these are by right and we go through these pretty often. But there is one difference here. So if you look at the findings, 2 through 4 are pretty clear. The one that I think there might be some question is on consistency. Especially because even though that is zone C2 now as a lot, it is now going to be strictly in a residential area versus if it was all on Elmwood and they subdivided 2 lots side by side. And not knowing, I mean, I do understand what some of the testimony was today, not knowing what project is going to be there. We run the risk of intensifying that CT use into a residential area, which can be, once this decision is made, that could be problematic for a neighborhood that's going to have to live with that.
So in order to make a find, because we need to make these 5 findings in order to vote for or against. And if it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan, we need to make a finding that it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan by finding that section in the comprehensive plan and putting that forward as a finding.
So if you think of the C2 corridor being Elmwood, that commercial strip, this is creating a new lot into an R zone. I can't speak for every property on Atlantic, so I don't want to misspeak and say that it's all zoned residential, but it's a predominantly residential neighborhood. So I think we are going against it in terms of we're not staying within the commercial corridor of Elmwood, which is what it was intended for in creating a commercial.
Bob, Elmwood Avenue is a commercial corridor.
Yes, Elmwood Avenue is a commercial corridor and it's not that designation or that name doesn't really it doesn't really mean much. What's important is what the designation is within the comprehensive plan and also what the zoning is, and within commercial zones, it's not only just, you know, a lot that fronts on a commercial street per se. The commercial zone could extend back more than one lot. It does that all over the place. And a property owner is certainly entitled to subdivide their property into lots that comply with the zoning ordinance within that commercial zoning.
In fact, this is
Doesn't-
already zoned C2, and I recall maybe 2 meetings ago, we had an applicant on another commercial corridor of Cranston Street who had a business on Cranston Street, I believe, and we were requested to give an opinion for the city council on changing the zoning in one of those side streets to combine those, and we gave a positive recommendation for that item. Because the commercial corridor isn't specifically defined as the first lot in it, sometimes goes in and out. Lot lines do jog, and this is already a C2 zone. We're not changing the zoning here.
Right. I have two things. One, if we knew that there was a house going on that lot, the vacant lot, it would seem more consistent with the street. Right, the C2 line is there because that is one lot. It goes back over. So we're making a new lot.
So if it is a commercial building, wouldn't they have to come back in front of us and the HDC for a new commercial building on this, no matter what?
Well, they'd have to come back. Well, I
For
don't
a
know about
residential building, they
before us.
probably wouldn't if it met zoning. They'd only have to go to HDC.
Right.
But for a commercial building, if my land use regulations serve me correctly, I believe they'd have to come back to both HDC and the planning board.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if it depends on the size of the building, any building that exceeds 10,000 square feet of floor area or has 10 or more dwelling units would be considered a land development project, major or minor. Minor if it's just residential. So if it is big enough, then it would have to come back to you. And of course, it would, anything, whether it's a house, an apartment building, or a commercial or a mixed use building, would have to go in front of the Historic District Commission. Can I make one last point?
Absolutely.
About this,
Yes.
which is that even if this lot is not subdivided, the owner of the property in a commercial zone is allowed to have more than one principal building on the lot. So, Attorney Conley used the term sort of invisible. The lot line, you don't see it on the ground. And there are scenarios where this parking lot gets developed, whether there's a lot line there or not.
Which would have the same regulatory impact. They would have to go to HDC, and if it was a minor or major land development project, they'd have to come to us.
That's
But
correct.
they wouldn't have to subdivide necessarily in order to do that. It's really just the legal bounds of each lot, so that one person may be able to own parcel A, one person may be able to own parcel B.
Which would, it does expand the use, right? Because
It doesn't necessarily expand the
By
use.
having options, right? If you have more than one owner, it does open to potential more opportunities versus it being a one owner property.
I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, there's still the same potential. If the current owner wants to develop on
Right.
parcel B,
But that
they
one,
could. And it seems like you wanted to chime in one more time. We'll allow that, and then
I
we'll
think
go back to deliberation and decisions.
I greatly appreciated the conversation, the concerns from the neighbors. But the bottom line is, in terms of legal rights, it's a by right proposal, and whether or not the subdivision is or is not there, it doesn't in any way change what could be built on the site or the process by which it would be built. So I think it's just important to note that in terms of any impact on character or consistency, this, whether or not this lot line exists, has zero impact on any of those things.
Okay, I think we spent a decent amount of time discussing this one. I don't see any way other than moving this forward as a by right subdivision. Doing otherwise, especially without finding true findings to the contrary, would be setting ourselves up for an appeal. So I just putting that out there. And that's a costly process for the city and for the applicant. So it's my opinion that this should be moved forward as stated by the findings in the staff report and the recommendations listed in the staff report. And if anyone cared to make that motion, they could say so moved.
Yeah, I agree. I think the argument is for the next point when they start to build and when they move to that next step. That's when they can stop something.
So I didn't hear a motion.
Motion to pass.
Say so moved.
So moved.
All right, there we go. Do we have a second? All right. We'll take Miguel as the second. We'll go around and do a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Miguel?
Aye.
And I vote aye. All
Thank
right. On to the second agenda item, which is a development plan review for case number 20.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I believe that the proponents for item number 3 might be in the room, and I believe that they are under some time constraints.
All right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I see Chris Brown there, and if they're ready, I would suggest you take that item out of order.
I'm pleased to do that. All right, so we will jump out of order. And we're going to jump into agenda item number 3. We'll hear agenda item number 2 after that. So this is a city council referral. It's referral number 3546, zoning ordinance amendment. And Bob, would you like to tee that one off?
Sure. So this is relatively simple. It would simply be an outright prohibition on self-storage facilities within the city. This was introduced by several members of the city council. And you should have received earlier today a letter from the council president, signed also by other members of the council. The mechanics of this are simple. It would simply add self-storage to the list of uses that are prohibited citywide. And I would defer to the council as to the reasons why. What I'll say is that we have obviously seen a number of these facilities come up in the city. There seems to be a fair amount of market demand for this type of use. And so, as you consider the arguments pro and con, know that if we didn't ban this, we would probably see more of these until we hit a particular level of saturation in the market. I have heard from the developers of self-storage facilities over the past few years that Providence is underserved as markets go. I'm not sure exactly where it stands right now with new ones being approved and coming online. But that's all I'll say for now. I'll give you the staff report after we hear from the proponents.
Okay, with that, we'll hear from the proponents.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman Gazzacco and the members of the commission. I'm Christina Brown. I'm the Director of Policy for the Providence City Council. I'm here to speak on item number 3, the prohibition of self-storage units. This, as Bob just explained, is a pretty straightforward proposal. We are removing the ability to build self-storage facilities by right in C3 and M1 zones throughout the city. This ordinance came to be because of many constituents and residents of the city being concerned about large-scale self-storage facilities popping up over the last couple of years. As you are all aware, 2 have just been recently approved, one on Branch Ave and one on Manton Ave. The one on Manton Ave is in Councilman Sanchez's ward. It covers 11 acres of developable land for a single story sort of vehicle-centric layout that was particularly concerning to his residents. I should say that the sponsors of this bill or this ordinance is Councilor Sanchez, Councilor Royas, Councilor Anderbois, and the Council President, Council Miller. I will keep my comments brief because I know this is a full agenda tonight. But the councilors brought this to the policy staff. We then researched it to see what was going on and what we could find out about this use throughout the city. We have found everything from self-storage industry articles about how advantageous it is to invest in self-storage facilities at this point in time, that they're a particular business that is resistant to recessions or depressions in the market. And we have seen over the pandemic several of these come into our city. As a small city with limited land for development and a need for job growth as well as housing units, the council finds this very concerning that we've seen more and more of these proposals come into the city. My policy staff found that there is approximately 6 million square feet of self-storage in the city and at least 50 self-storage facilities within a 10-mile radius. We feel strongly that our residents are well served if they do need self-storage facilities. We also found, similar to the planning staff report, that these facilities offer very minimal employment opportunities for our residents. The councilors also feel really strongly that they don't do anything to spur economic development or enliven the pedestrian or commercial corridors in our city. In fact, we believe that they do exactly the opposite. We have dug into the zoning, and we know that many of these parcels that are now being developed for self-storage units are actually allowed by right to be mixed unit development. And we strongly believe that the intent of the comprehensive plan is to support housing and job growth and economic development in the city for those zones. And we certainly would like to see those parcels of land, as they are scarce, used for the highest and best use, which we believe is a mixture of housing at many different rates, including affordable, as well as commercial spaces that actually offer services and benefits to our residents. The planning staff report, I believe, supports the values of the council. And I want to apologize. The sponsors wanted to be here, but we had a special meeting called and they're still at City Hall.
Understood. Thank you. If I could ask you a few questions.
Sure.
The 2 that you referenced, Manton Ave and Branch Ave, do you know, and maybe Bob, what are the underlying zoning districts of those developments? Were they the commercial or were they industrial?
Those are both in the C3 zone.
Okay. Did your staff or did anyone research how many of these self-storage facilities are in the C zone versus the M zones?
I don't think, I don't have that data here. We did look at what wards they were in, how large they were, those types of things. I can't remember off the top of
Because
my head.
I agree completely with everything you're saying.
Yeah,
I just, I think it's bad planning practice to prohibit something full bore. I agree with all of the comments on the city council president's letter, all of the detrimental effects. But I'm just wondering, like, everything that you talked about was commercial corridors, pedestrian friendly, mixed use developments. All of that is in the C zone. I'm wondering if we wouldn't affect the same outcome by simply removing it from the C zone and leaving it in the only other place, which is M1, that it would be allowed in the city, and then have a mechanism like special use permit to still allow that if the need arose. The only way that anything else of this type of business will ever be allowed is by a use variance. Even if an existing self-storage facility ceases to exist, to bring one back, you'd have to get a use variance. Which is that correct, or is the vested right?
It's correct, but you won't get it. The zoning,
Right.
the zoning board.
Well,
will
that's what I
never-
mean. A use variance is impossible.
Yeah,
Like it's virtually impossible. You have to liquidate all beneficial use of the land before you get a use variance. So basically we're saying right now, this is as many as we have. And I'm not speaking self-storage facilities specifically. I'm just speaking land use in general, good planning practices. And we'll never have it again. It'll just keep going down and down and down and down until it's done. And it's hard for me to stomach that. I don't know, what is the council's opinion on that?
the council's opinion is that the facilities that we have now, which will be allowable until they do
Till
not-
they cease to exist.
till they cease to exist, is enough. That we want to see our parcels and our land used in different ways. And furthermore, we would let beneficial use. Will that still be a beneficial use in 10 years?
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely. Bob, do you have any idea how many of these facilities are in C zones versus M zones? I know I'm catching you off guard here.
I don't. I would say that the majority of them are in M zones. Simply because we have more M zones. And I'm thinking that the Manton and Branch might be
The outliers with the
They
C.
might be outliers. We don't have a lot of C3.
I look at the prohibited lists and I see billboard, outdoor advertising, halfway house, industrial uses of carcinogens, basically, landfills, prisons, racetracks, slaughterhouse, stockyard fencing pen, waste incineration facility, and now self-storage facility. The prohibited use is like, that's it, we're done. And that's just, I'm not saying I'm not gonna make a positive recommendation. I'm just trying to get more information from this. This is just because it's not something we normally do, is prohibit a use full bore. Commissioners, do you have any other?
I mean, the language also caught my attention, because it's strong, right, prohibited. I don't know if there's some other way to restrict it where there's a mechanism to at least apply for a storage facility that then the council can, I mean, I don't want to add bureaucracy and add another thing, but
I mean, I think
it
in this
might be a
instance,
better,
it's okay.
right, where, I mean, how would you, let's say a developer found a facility that just had no other use that you know, is not good for housing or commercial. How would that developer be able to apply to be able to?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but they'd have to
What-
get a use variance, right? Or because it's a prohibited use, they wouldn't even be able to get that.
Yeah, well, the other option is to go back to the council and ask the council to change the zoning back in such a way that it was allowed.
Would
The
create a
challenge-
special
But
zone.
that would be every property in that case, like if you just wanted to just to do one particular project. Because if you change the zoning now, it's back to where we are now. where
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
open.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the way zoning works is that it's allowed, it's not allowed, or it's allowed by special use permit. And special use permit is something where it has certain conditions that are imposed on it before you could establish the use. But if you met those conditions as laid out in the zoning ordinance, it can't be denied. So there's really a body is not the only body that has the discretion as to whether this should be allowed or not is the city council.
Okay, so if it came forward at some point in the future, that is the only mechanism, and if something happened, that could be allowed. Okay. All right.
Chair, if I
Yes.
may, I would like to introduce Councillor Anderblaw, who is one of the sponsors of this ordinance and has just joined the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Apologies for being tardy.
No problem.
We were just
You have-
taking
you
a
have
vote. and
important
I
work to do across the
Excellent.
street.
I literally ran here. Apologies also for being out of breath. Chris said we were on. But I really want to thank you all for considering this ordinance update, and thank you to Bob, who's not here. Not sure what Chris already shared. I imagine it was amazing. But a few things I just wanted to share. So on behalf of the other two counselors who were the primary sponsors, Councilman Royas and Councilman Sanchez, we both have received, or all three of us have received, just countless calls and emails from our constituents about the rapid proliferation of self-storage units across our city. I represent Ward 3, which is kind of the northern part of the east side, Whole Foods North, basically. We have a new facility opening up on Branch Ave. And regardless of the merits of any single one of these, seeing that open up right across the highway from the last self-storage that opened up, opened the floodgates for my neighborhood to be like, wow, when is enough enough? We have more than 6 million square feet of self-storage units in the city. At the same time, so I really did literally run here. At the same time, we're experiencing a housing crisis. We know, and I'm sure Chris shared this research with you, but that these self-storage facilities across the country prey on communities like this who are experiencing distress, who are experiencing housing crises, who are experiencing income inequality and things like that. It's a place for people to put their things when they're not able to have a place for themselves. Our community's focus should be, or our community's economic development focus should be on things that revitalize our actual communities, not things that provide one or two pretty low-paying jobs and no actual like engagement with the community. The neighborhood I represent includes Hope Street. That is like an amazing, vital area. A lot of those businesses, pardon me, are owned by people who live just blocks from Hope Street. That's the kind of thing that we should be incentivizing for development here in the city. And obviously there's going to be some industry, there's going to be some large business, that's fine. But like these types of businesses that don't actually contribute anything to our city are already taking up 6 million square feet of usable property. And I'll also just, my fellow councilor Sanchez, his ward includes a potential 11-acre site. My day job is in clean energy. That's about 3 megawatts of solar. That would be one of our larger solar facilities in the state. Not saying we should put solar there, but just so you can think of like other uses, 11 acres is huge. And that is now just there to store stuff and displace people. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to chat with you guys today. I'm really grateful that you are taking this up seriously, and happy to continue the conversation.
So what I was posing before you arrived is, you know, prohibiting something just full bore is kind of like the end all be all.
Mhm.
There's no coming back from that unless obviously the city council changes their mind at some point in the future, or as we learned just now, if a project came in and wanted approval, the city council could find a way to do that, create a special zone, do something. Both of the projects you mentioned were in Manton Ave and Branch Ave, were both commercial parcels.
Mhm.
So that was the only commercial ones that continue to come up. I'm wondering if the city council, and maybe you've had these discussions, if you've thought of any other ways to do this other than a blanket prohibition, and just keep it to the industrial zone and remove it completely from the commercial zone, just as good planning practice. Prohibiting a use is just not really good planning practice. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
open to your
And I
opinion.
totally hear that and understand that. I think when Councilor Reyes and Sanchez and I had this conversation along with our policy director, some of what came up is this already is quite a stunning amount of self-storage for one city. And given that there are still those 2 additional ways that a self-storage facility could move forward, if for some reason that was like the best possible alternative for what could be built in that space, there's still some recourse to do that. But to
I think the only recourse would be to come to city council.
Yeah, but like, the one
Definitely
recourse, sorry, my bad,
yeah.
to grant that kind of exemption. And so we did discuss this, it just seems like 6 million square feet is already enough. It's not the kind of economic development we want to be incentivizing in our city. The other option, it seems to me, but you guys are planning professionals, including Bob, is the not allowing it by right in any zoning district. And having a little more option instead of just prohibiting it completely, but not just like allowing.
How would that work, Bob? If instead of adding it to our prohibited uses, we just removed the special use permit from self-storage facility from the C zones and the M zone, what would that then do? It's not a specifically prohibited use. I'm thinking outside of.
So right now, self-storage is permitted by right in C3 and in M1. If you were to, so what's being proposed
And
is
with special use permit in C2?
no special use permit anywhere.
Okay, all right.
It's only allowed in 2 zones, and in both of those zones, it's allowed by right.
Okay.
So you could add it to both those zones, the special use.
Well, I would even argue maybe take it out of the commercial zone if the ultimate goal is to have more.
I'll make us just.
Yeah, go right ahead, Bob. I'm sorry, we interrupted you.
First is that residential is not allowed in M1. So something to consider. So this isn't displacing any land that could be used for residential in the M1 zone.
Right.
E3 certainly is available for
absolutely
residential. That's one thing to consider. The other thing is that if you want to make it a little bit harder, you could subject it to a special use permit. Again, a special use permit is a situation where there are criteria that you have to demonstrate that you meet when you go to the zoning board, and the board could only deny a project if it doesn't meet the criteria. It doesn't have sort of the discretion to, subjectively decide that they don't like it and therefore they would deny it. So, if you want the city to have the ability to say no, you'd have to craft special use permit criteria that would somehow,
make it difficult.
Make it difficult. And off the top of my head, I'm not sure what, how you could do that. Maybe they'd have to demonstrate somehow that I don't know. I can't think of it of off the top of my head. So really I think it's a question of, do you want it at all? Do you want it in some places? Do you want to whittle down where it's allowed? Do you want to ban it entirely? I mean, it really is, at the end of the day, this is a recommendation to the council.
They're going to do what they, yes.
And it's up to the council to do it. What I will say, and I'll just sort of, I might as well tell you what we say in our staff report, which is that this proposal it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. So in other words, you can do it. The council can do it. They're not obliged to do it. They don't have to do it. But this sort of a decision is within their authority under the comprehensive plan. So, I think at this moment, it really is just sort of a matter of preference. And, and the question is this the right thing? Zoning is something that can always be amended, if we move forward with a ban and we find down the road that that, maybe there's some extenuating circumstances, the council could reverse course.
Yeah, I guess before you arrived as well, I think I said, I agree with everything that's being stated here. I'm just wondering if there's another way to skin this cat, and
I prefer not to skin any cats.
I don't actually. I paused because I don't either.
But I think like to use that really positive note, I think like what we're trying to do is like bake the cookie that is this amazing city. And I don't want to add poison to that cookie. I want to add raisins. I want to add lettuce, but I want to add chocolate chips. I want to add delicious things that like will benefit our community. And at this point, I mean, and it is even in this report, these facilities do not support employment relative to their size. And they are often located or maybe located on parcels that can be zoned for, could be used for multifamily housing or job creation. I mean, these are huge facilities that maybe have 2 employees that are paid minimum wage. Like even in those other industrial uses would be far preferable to what these facilities could be used for. Even that like hypothetical solar plant would have way more jobs associated with it than one of these facilities.
Is there a way, Bob, to give a positive recommendation? Not saying that we will, this is just hypothetical. With also the caveat that maybe they look at entertaining just removing the allowed use in the C zones and making it by special use permit in the M and letting them decide which vehicle they'd like to use.
You could certainly do that.
Because this is just a recommendation. This is
Correct.
I just go back to good planning practice.
And
In all
limited
commercial
use
zones.
in all commercial-
I think
in all-
absolutely, just remove it from commercial zones. And in M1, where it's allowed by right, attach a special use permit to it as the other option that the city council could consider. Because I agree with the intent. I just don't know that I agree with the method. That's just my opinion. We haven't heard from everyone else. I've been grandstanding here, so take it away. Any other questions for the?
I feel like it really doesn't give any value in the industrial centers either. You know, we'd rather see businesses come into the city and grow and have, 20, 50, 100 employees as opposed to self-storage. And certainly doesn't make any sense value-wise to the city with residential. But I do understand the end all be all. It's, who knows, 30 years down the road, all of a sudden we need self-storage.
And if that happens, I guess the greater minds than ours will prevail, and they'll bring it back for a zoning change at that time. Haven't heard. Noel?
So my thoughts, I'm definitely not one who would use a self-storage facility. Don't think it's really a valuable thing personally. I'm looking at the list of other banned,
that's
prohibited uses, right? And I know we've had discussions about the billboards here. Halfway houses, I think people have found their way around it.
I agree.
And then some of the other banned activities are also minimal. Some of them minimal employment and things that we don't want to have close by.
Slaughterhouse probably has a couple people working there.
Well, yes, but we don't need to have that discussion.
I'm joking. Yes.
I understand it. Like, so these are usually found outside the city limits, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And so, in that sense, self-storage facilities, well, they could be.
They could be. They could be somewhere else with more open space. You're absolutely right.
But I kind of also agree with what you're pushing, that it's a prohibition against some freedoms that we have, right, in this country to do whatever we want to do if it's legal.
Right.
And so that's my resistance to banning it outright. But then as I consider the rest of the list, it's like,
I just keep going back to it. I agree with everything you're saying.
And so if we could limit it in a way that's really difficult to ever have one again, that's fine. If the only way to do it is to add it to the list.
Right.
It becomes like a slaughterhouse.
I guess the other option is that we've discussed is removing it from the C, adding it as special use permit at M1, and the city council would have to then come up with a criteria that would be very difficult to meet, that makes it very specific for that special use permit to be presented. Because Bob's right, if it's allowed by special use permit, all they have to do is meet the criteria of that special use permit and it's allowed. And if they don't get it, it's, it opens up to an appeal and then they'll eventually get it when they appeal to a higher body.
So have we heard anything from people who want to do these kind of things?
We're not in public comment portion yet, so I guess maybe that's the appropriate time unless there's any closing remarks.
I would just want to add, and I sort of alluded to this in my opening remarks, but there are several of these facilities within a short driving distance of the city. And I understand your viewpoint, best practices in planning, not to just arbitrarily prohibit something. But given this, we are a small city. Generally, when people are going to self-storage units, they are driving there with their things or have a vehicle to get their things to that place. And these are popping up not only prolifically within the city limits, but outside of the city limits. And I just really strongly do not believe that our residents are underserved and cannot access facilities if needed.
And I just, want to appreciate how much work and deliberation you guys are putting into this. I know that this is a volunteer body and very much appreciate the seriousness with which you take your job. And we'll definitely consider any recommendations that you make to the council, and want to reiterate the seriousness with which we made this recommendation to complete abandonment. The over 6 million square feet that we already have is ample. And to Chris's or our policy director's point, there are many of these facilities right outside of the city lines where land is not, we're a very densely populated city and there's a lot of potential uses for our land. And to Noel Sanchez's point, there are ways that people get around some of these restrictions if you make it available. Like I think you use the halfway house example. So to make it very, very clear that this is not something that is in line with the growth of our city and with what is best for our city, I think it's cleanest and most transparent to business owners and to our residents that what we're saying is that this is, we have enough, we're full, and we would rather prioritize development that's in line with our comp plan and that's in line with the desires of our residents. I can only speak for myself, when I can say the countless, and I could go back to my desk and count them, but countless numbers of emails and calls, passionate calls and emails that I've received from my residents and I agree about this. And I know that Councilor Sanchez and Royas have received the same. And so this is something that the residents of the city are really thinking about and really upset about, to see this as a land use for the city when we could be spending our time prioritizing really exciting industrial uses, business uses, and multifamily housing in a lot of these facilities or places where these facilities are being located. So I'm really grateful for the amount of time and effort that you're putting into this. And thank you.
Thank you. All right. I guess with that, we'll hear the staff report and then we'll open up to public comment and see if there's anyone else who would like to chime in.
Okay, thank you. So just very briefly, I think we've talked about this. We've covered most of the issues that we raise in our staff report. We know what these things are. They're big. They're on large lots. Not the most attractive buildings from an urban design perspective, and they don't support a lot of employment. I think it's a reasonable interpretation of the comprehensive plan that propagation of self-storage facilities in areas zoned to achieve jobs, housing, and transit. It could run counter to the plan's intent. So as I mentioned before, this prohibition is certainly within the purview of the city council, and the comprehensive plan doesn't require it, but certainly supports it. So I guess when all's said and done, our feeling is that on balance, we would support this amendment, and we advise you to recommend approval to the city council.
All right. Thank you, Bob. All right. This is a public hearing. If there is anyone in the public who would like to speak on this agenda item, please raise your hand. If you're joining us from home, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in. Again, *9 if you're calling in, or raise your virtual hand in the bottom middle section of your screen. We'll start with the people who are here today, and I would just ask the applicants to move to another table. That's the only microphone they have. That's the only reason. And we'll start with Attorney Garrity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, John Garrity. I hadn't intended to speak on this when I arrived here today. I have a couple of matters here, but I do represent an owner of the self-storage facility at 204 Hartford Avenue, and we've been before this board with his applications. So I totally understand, appreciate the goal and the policy which is being sought here: more housing, not more sprawl of these new self-storage facilities. My client is in an old building that reused an old factory building and put it to good use and is employing people. This is a use that's not noxious. It's not a noxious use. It's not a nuclear power plant. It's a use that people need. I use self-storage facilities, and I know a lot of people do. And I hear the goal, but the answer is not, well, they'll be better in Smithfield or they'll be better in Cranston. So this is a city that has many different uses. And I firmly believe that things have an appropriate place. Self-storage facilities do not belong in residential zones. And I see the point with respect to commercial zones, but industrial zones, you cannot have residences in industrial in M1 zone. So they do have appropriate places. And I think the right thing to do, as you've been discussing, is that if you want to put a special use standard in the M1 zone, then they'd have to go before the zoning board and prove that they are consistent with the neighborhood, and then they will not result in detrimental effects to the neighborhood. You know, there may be an old factory building that's entirely appropriate for this in the M1 zone that can be reused and can't be used for anything else. I mean, perhaps then they would go to the zoning board and prove that otherwise they'd be deniable beneficial use and be entitled to a zoning use variance. But Mr. Chairman, as you said, you know, 2% get use variances. Right. I mean, maybe. Let me just make the other point that I think is particularly important that has not been discussed here. So you're gonna outlaw this in the M1 zone. So there are storage facilities in the M1 zone. This would become a non-conforming use. So essentially you would prohibit expansion of any of the facilities. It would be a non-conforming use, and you need a special use permit, a use variance to expand those facilities. So you'd constrain the existing facilities because it's now non-conforming, and they're very severely restricted as to what they can do. So I think that's a point. I get the point totally. They don't want to take up the residences. They want more dwellings, which is badly needed in the city. I get that. I'm just concerned that if you start to restrict or outlaw them other places, you put restrictions on the existing facilities, which prevent them from doing their business appropriately. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Garrity. Anyone else here who would like to speak on this matter? All right, please state your name and address for the record. Mr. Dalgarian.
I'm going to stand because my right leg is not a happy leg at the moment.
Can you just move the microphone up so that our viewers at home can hear you?
Of course.
Thank you.
Grant Dalgarian, 20 Exeter Street. I saw this on the agenda. I was excited because when the proposition to transform the Board of Elections building and the surrounding territory into self-storage was dismaying to me. I couldn't believe it. I said, geez, sure, it's zoned commercial, and maybe there's not enough demand for commercial activity in that particular location, but it's a perfect location for mixed-use residential. It's well served by transit, so I was very dismayed that it was going to be
self-storage. I'm wondering if we can, if somehow that can be brought back for review, but if it can't, it can't. But now's the time to just say no. If down the road, the folks to be want to try to formulate something that would work in rare exceptions, but not universally, well, that's fine. But for right now, we need to just say no. And let me remind this commission that just being on the list of not permitted uses doesn't prohibit anybody from going to the zoning board and getting a use variance. And the example that's near and dear to my heart, as it were, is billboards. If it wasn't for yours truly, we would have 2 jumbotron billboards on 95 at the Branch Avenue exit. Why? Because the zoning board said, yes, you're fine. And we had to appeal. And that took time, effort, energy, and resources. We did it. And we don't have that there. There were so many reasons not to have it. But the zoning board said, yes, you're fine. So putting the prohibition for now makes sense. It would be instructive to know where all of a sudden this demand is coming from. I mean, are we all acquiring so much stuff that we don't know what to do with? Or are people just moving around constantly? They can't be bothered taking it with them, so they put them in self-storage. I don't know, but that would be instructive to at least get an understanding of this. But in the meantime, we need to just say no. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dolgarian. Is there anyone else here in the audience? Liv, what about anyone at home? All right, there are no other hands raised. So with that, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. I agree with everything that we're saying. I want to give a positive recommendation.
That would be my preference.
That's really the only vehicle to add another layer of, right now it's allowed by right. And we would add some sort of special, we wouldn't. Obviously, the city council has to act on whatever they do. They would be the ones who would change the zoning if they remove it from C zone or add a special use permit criteria to the M1 zone.
I think in the spirit of what you're proposing, meets part of the intent by the city council to prohibit more of these uses. It's going to be on the city council to take the recommendation as they please and deliberate. But I think if we put it that way, at least we're asking if they could think about the language that they're using, so it's not so stringent, but still accomplishes their goal, their intentions. So
Yeah, I agree with what both of them are saying. Yes, yeah.
So Bob, how would we make a motion for that? Would we just say so moved? So,
I think Bob
lose
may
Bob?
have been temporarily kicked off the Zoom. He's rejoining
what do you say about
momentarily.
that?
So
To make a positive recommendation to either prohibit the use as requested by city council, or take another look at modifying, removing from the commercial zones, the by right use, removing from the M1 zone by right use, and adding some sort of special use permit criteria for the M1 use only. Okay, and then all we'd have to do is say so moved.
But I have a question.
Yes,
So is removing it by right, removing it?
yeah, that's
Like all
removing,
the way?
we're removing it from the C zones.
Right.
And we're only allowing it in the M1 zone by special use permit that is created by the city council. That might be a little more cumbersome than your normal special use permit.
So moved.
The two alternative recommendations.
Yes, positive recommendation for either or. So we have a so moved, we have a second.
Second.
All right. Is that Miguel?
No, well,
We'll take that one. All right, we have a second by Will. All right, so we'll go around and do a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
aye.
Miguel?
aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you very much and good luck with your changes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now we'll go back to agenda item number 2, which is a development plan review for case number 2023-07 DPR 73 and 78 Stanwood Street. The applicant is the Montessori Community School of Rhode Island.
Mr. Chair, this one I'm hoping will be relatively easy.
We spent a lot of time on some relatively
Yeah.
easy matters already tonight, Bob.
Yeah, I shouldn't,
Don't jinx us.
I'll do my best. Maybe it's more complicated. I don't know. So primary and secondary schools are allowed in residential zones in the city. And if they have simply one building, they're allowed by right and they don't need any special approval. But when they start to become a campus, which in zoning means you have more than one building, then we require development plan review. And we've seen this a couple of times where small schools acquire properties, they become campuses, and then they become subject to the development plan requirements of the zoning ordinance. In this case, this is the Montessori Community School of Rhode Island. They have a facility currently at 73 Stanwood Street. They bought a house across the street. And they want to use that house for institutional purposes. This now creates a very small campus of 2 parcels of land. And in this case, they're simply disclosing to us that they have this property, that they intend to use it for institutional uses, for school uses. And that's basically it. There's not too much that they need to do beyond let you know that they have this, tell you where it is, what they're going to use it for. Their plan indicates that they will comply with the parking requirements for primary and secondary schools. So this really is an as of right development. It's more of a disclosure exercise. I do believe that there are folks from I'm going to promote folks from the architecture firm Persich, and maybe they can give a little bit more information about what's happening here. You can go ahead and unmute and identify yourself.
Yeah. So you guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good evening, everyone. My name is Almin Persich. I'm the architect, and we're working with the Montessori Community School of Rhode Island. We have been doing so for a little while. I guess to kind of follow up on the introduction a little bit, the school has existed in this location since 2013 when they first essentially renovated the existing building at 73 Stanwood and have since kind of operated within that. Because the school is highly valued in the community, it has over the years increased its kind of application numbers such that at this point they get about 60 applications a year in the past 2 years, and then hold waiting pools of 35 to 45 students. And this is just really simply with word of mouth. With that, when the opportunity came for them to purchase the building across the street, they did so because it seemed a relatively easy access to essentially another primary classroom, which in Montessori terms really means just children between the ages of 3 and 6. And because Montessori's educational model kind of supports the, let's say, kind of a small scale residential environment, this seemed to be actually a pretty good fit. In terms of what we're doing with the building, we're really not changing anything on the outside, and I'm happy to also share my screen to kind of show you the existing drawings. So just give me a second. So this is the site plan. On top, we see 73 Stanwood. At the bottom, we see the location of the house. Currently, the house had been sort of occupied by the same people for a long period of time, essentially as a residential property. These are the existing plans. We are suggesting to essentially create a large interior space here with some bathrooms on the side for the kids, another extension of the classroom here, and then upstairs convert into shared office space and 2 individual offices. The house we will maintain as is. There's really no other plans other than repairing, lead remediation, things like that, and then extending what's it called? A kind of essentially having the backyard be used as a play space for the school. The occupants of the buildings will primarily be the 16 primary students and 3 staff members. And as Director Azar suggested, we are in compliance with the parking requirements, and in fact are kind of improving the parking requirements, because currently 73 Stanwood has a use variance for 1 less parking lot that actually parking space that they actually have. And so by adding this other building to the campus, we actually are now fully in compliance as we are with the rest of the zoning requirements. So I think the staff report also summarizes the situation fairly well, but I'm open to any other questions that people may have.
Oh, thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you very much. I guess with that, we don't have any questions for you, sir. Thank you for your presentation. We will hear the staff report and then open it up to public comment.
Okay, commissioners. So once again, this is a property that's zoned R3. This is a use that's permitted in the R3 zone. They are required to submit this development plan that meets the standards in the zoning ordinance. They comply with the parking regulations. And therefore, it's our opinion that they've satisfactorily demonstrated compliance with the requirements in section 1202M of the zoning ordinance. The change will not trigger conformance with any other dimensional requirements, and no zoning relief is required. Therefore, we recommend that you should approve the master plan amendment, finding it to be in conformance with the zoning ordinance. I'm not sure master plan amendment is the right term. I would say you should approve the development plan, finding it to be in conformance with the zoning ordinance.
Okay, we'll change that if we make such a recommendation. All right, we have the staff report. At this point, we will open the item up for public comment. If you're here in person, raise your hand. If you're joining us in the virtual worlds, in the interwebs, please raise your virtual hand. in the bottom middle portion of your screen, or press *9. Right, we will promote the individual who just raised their hand. It's thinking.
Mr. Chair, FYI, I don't see your video and I could hear some sound, but it was quiet. I'm not sure if the maybe the meeting owl.
I think the owl just rejoined. Can you hear us now?
I can hear you. Yep.
All right, I think it got disconnected somehow and might be reconnecting. Yep, see?
Yep, there you go. Perfect.
All right. Thank you for that. Well, so we were attempting to promote someone.
Yep.
Paula Donovan.
Yep, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes. So please state your name and your address for the record, please.
Sure, my name is Paula Donovan and I live at 67 Lenox Avenue in Providence.
Thank you.
I just have
Take it away.
Yep, I just have, it's actually more of a question in terms of this being approved within the confines of the comprehensive plan. My concern is that housing is being removed from the neighborhood and turned more into an office space. And so that feels like that does not fit within the comprehensive plan. So I don't know if there's any assessment within the tenets of the comprehensive plan that this is in actuality removing housing from the neighborhood, which is, Rhode Island has a shortage of housing, Providence has a shortage of housing. So I'd like to hear feedback on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the virtual world or here in person who would like to comment on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. And maybe we'll bring the applicant back up if you're able to, Liv.
Yeah, or Mr. Chair, I could simply address that question.
I mean, my opinion is, and I may be right or wrong, is that schooling, especially like a Montessori type school in a residential area, serves the surrounding residents. And I don't believe this is going to be an office. I thought it was going to be additional classroom space as well. But I'll let Bob or the applicant speak to that.
I'd be happy to let the applicant speak to that. I believe it is. Well, let's have the applicant answer that question, then I can speak to the comprehensive plan question.
So the primary intent is really to create that large primary classroom on the first floor, because that's really the only way that the school is able to kind of promote this type of education in the community, for which, as I mentioned, there's a kind of a high level of demand. And that is essentially the reason why they even purchased this in the first place. The fact that right now, most of the facility at 73 Stanwood, there's one single kind of common shared space that the school uses. And the rest of it is really just classroom and community space. And so the common workspace that would essentially be created on the upper story and the two offices are sort of the additions, and I guess do function as kind of support spaces, but the primary objective is utilizing the playground, the yard in the back, and then creating essentially the classroom space for 16 children.
I just have a question on the 16. Is that a net increase of 16 kids, or are some of the kids from 78 move into 73?
No, it's a net increase.
So it's more.
Yes.
Thank you. That kind of meets the plan where schools can by right exist in residential areas, and is increasing the amount of children that are being served.
Yeah,
16.
I think a lot of the things we hear in front of us are contrary to family in residential areas, and this is actually one that's promoting families in residential areas. So I think it's a complement to the surrounding neighborhood. But Bob, you could speak to the comprehensive plan aspect of that.
Right. I mean, I think you kind of just said it. So we are concerned anytime housing is displaced, especially today, given the housing situation. We would certainly prefer that anything that's currently serving as housing continue as housing. That said, we always have to find a balance with our land use practices, and we think that that having schools available in neighborhoods, sort of surrounded by housing, is good land use practice in a city. It would be ideal if everybody could walk to school or be within a very short distance of a school. So this definitely, I think, fits in with the way that the comprehensive plan imagines the city, imagines the amenities that are available to people who are living in the city. Again, within reason, and there should be a balance. I would feel concerned if we saw large expanses of land being purchased, houses demolished, and say, parking lots developed to accommodate, commuters coming from outside of the city or even within the city. I think in a situation like this, it's a very modest expansion that will have, if anything, a benefit to the community.
It's still going to look and feel like a residential house, complementing the neighborhood surrounding. So I definitely agree with that. Any other thoughts, commissioners?
So I have a question. Does it, since it's now a campus, a school campus, does it change the way their development moves forward? Because I know we've heard
I'm unable to hear anyone.
Oh, you're back.
Yep. I'm sorry,
You're muted.
I completely missed whatever you had said because
Yeah.
the internet completely cut out.
Same here. I missed the question. Noel,
There was a little note that popped up on our screen that said our internet is unstable, so that could be part of the reason.
We've been having repeated problems throughout this entire meeting. Hopefully we can resolve it at a later point.
Hopefully, all right, so Noel, why don't you reiterate your question?
So now that the school has two buildings, and does it change the way that their development moves forward in that they have to submit institutional master plans?
Yeah, so it's not an institutional master plan per se. It's not the same as what colleges and hospitals have to submit, but it is sort of similar, but on a smaller scale. They would have to they'd have to detail any capital improvements, any new structures, any demolition, any new outdoor facilities, things of that nature. Given this very modest expansion, a lot of those requirements don't apply. But as if they grow further, this process is intended for them to disclose to the community and to the city plan commission, and the bigger the campus, the more the requirements would be. So, for example, I can give an example. I don't know if you were around, Noel, relatively recently, the community prep campus, they went from being essentially one building to acquiring buildings. Now they occupy virtually an entire block. There was a street abandonment. So they've sort of like gradually grown. Recently, we had Nuestro Mundo School. They were seeking a street abandonment, and they've acquired property. So this, as these campuses grow, they will be required to submit more and more information about what their future plans are.
Yeah, I think we're taxing the internet here, so let's move this item along pretty quickly. We'll take a 5-minute break. I need to use the restroom anyway. Let's keep to your
I
question.
did. I have two more quick questions. One. Is, do we know how many children?
This is unfortunate.
Yeah.
I also don't understand how you and I are still on here and they're not.
I know. I guess it's a. All right. I just became the. Oh no! Wait a minute. I think what's happening is the Wi-Fi.
We're going to short break until reset.
All right. Take a
All right.
Break.
So did it pass?
Turn off the. You know, we can't, I know we can't turn off our side, we can turn off the.
So Bob, where this should I stay on until the reset?
I would, yeah.
Okay.
It looks like they're taking a little bit of a break. I'll make a phone call.
Sure.
Yeah.
They're breaking until for about 10 minutes. So hang in there.
Yeah, he is, his camera. and microphone.
Okay, good. All right, can you guys hear us now? All right, perfect. We apologize for that. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, which happen sometimes in the hybrid zones. What I will say is, to reduce the bandwidth, Bob, maybe stay off camera unless needed. Definitely feel free to chime in with your voice, and then we'll say to the applicants, if you feel the need to be on camera, you can. If you don't, you can also just use, your voice. We know we have to be on camera. I believe the applicants have to have the ability to be on camera as well. But Bob, I think we can manage with. We love seeing your smiling
That's fine.
face.
No
but,
problem.
may help this meeting
Yeah,
proceed.
works for
along.
me as well.
It's a thought. It may not work. It may not make a difference, but we're going to try. So we will pick up where we left off. Noel had his question answered about the institutional use. He started making another question, and I believe that's when we got cut off.
Right, so my second question was about do you know how many children from the neighborhood attend the school? And well, that was my main question. And then with the future plans, the future use of the building that they do have, because there is I think there's some vacant space in the building that they own, the second and third floor.
Second and third floor might be vacant, and you said the house next door to them just burned down.
Right.
Okay, so we'll kick that back to the applicant.
Sure, happy to answer that. So while I can't comment on how many children from the neighborhood attend the school, I can point out that 27% of all students receive CCAP funding and 42% receive need-based financial aid. And I think also especially over the last 2 years, the interest in the neighborhood has grown. And I think that's how also the school has developed its kind of close relationship with the people surrounding it. Now, as for the plans, sort of future plans, to kind of give you some context, about 24,000 square feet, which are pretty much all the empty lots, including multiple buildings and the church, are owned by New England Church Plantings, which, hold massive tracts of land in the neighborhood. And the house that just burned down, I believe, is not for sale, nor kind of within vicinity or adjacency to the school itself, such that would make sense for, even attempt that. On top of it, I think the school itself would have to go through like a massive fundraising campaign to even kind of try to think about that. The plans for the existing building, 73 Stanwood, second and third floor, are empty and are intended sometime in the, 5-year plan, maybe, are definitely intended to be converted into additional classrooms. But how that will work out, where the funding will come from and so on, is kind of a big question mark, especially because the school, unlike, let's say, other educational institutions, isn't necessarily liquid such that it would be able to afford such growth in such short term.
Great,
Thanks. Yeah.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions for the applicant?
No questions on mine.
All right, then I believe we're on to deliberations and decisions. We've already had public comment on this, correct?
No, we have public comment on this, right?
No, we haven't.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
We did.
We did.
Yeah, we had
Yeah.
one person who asked about.
Oh,
the-
yes, sorry.
Yes, so the internet snafu. It's
Snap my
tearing a-
brain as well.
uh,
I'm on the same wavelength.
creating a tear in the cosmic fabric of the universe. All right. So with that,
So based on today's discussion, I move to approve the campus development plan.
all right. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
1 second.
All right, we have a fully formed motion on the table. We'll go around and do a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Miguel?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Best of luck to you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. we're moving right along to city council referral agenda item number 4, 3547 sorry, it's city council referral number 3547. It's for 12 Buffalo Court. Bob, would you like to tee this one up?
Yes. So this is a petition for a zoning change to go from R3 to R4. And this is actually on a block that you recently approved another zoning change to R4, Avon Street. You may remember that came in just a couple of months ago. In that case, there was a situation with a very large house that was non-conforming. It had a lot of units in it, and the change was to reflect the existing condition and then allow for some more development. In this case, this is a odd-shaped vacant lot. It's very long and very shallow, and the developer here intends to build a couple of two-family homes on this, and this would not be compliant in the R3 zone. It would be close, but not quite there. So R4 is a zone that is available adjacent to this parcel, and this zoning change would be supported by the comprehensive plan. So I think that's a good enough introduction to turn it over to Attorney Gary.
Gary, he's trying to break things.
Yes.
If the internet's not broken enough.
I apologize for that, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, John Garrahy on behalf of the applicant here. So this is a request from R3 to R4. I always find it interesting whenever I go to view these properties, and I've lived in the city all my life, but you go to see these little nooks and crannies of these neighborhoods and how they're structured and what has been, how it's been constructed or near Route 10. And it's kind of a little bit, I would say, with no offense, a little bit disjointed the way it is. And it needs, there's the Cranston Street, which has the commercial zone, the C2 zone, and the big, I'm sorry, I don't know what the big apartment buildings are right adjacent to this property. But you can't get to them from the street, from Buffalo Court. And you have this Buffalo Court strip that's kind of a very narrow strip which goes down Buffalo Court. And as Bob indicated, you have this big large house on Avon Street that was just zoned R4. So the attempt here is to construct, and we have a plan, and we presented a plan, and as Bob indicated, it's two-family structures. It's two-family structures, entirely appropriate to the area. You add some more housing, which we all heard tonight is needed. Is not too much for the neighborhood. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan, and really helps to infill the neighborhood. There are the vacant lots that doesn't serve any purpose. So it really kind of helps to create a neighborhood. There's one there, but a little bit disjointed, frankly. And I think this is going to be a help and consistent with the neighborhood. The R4, as I said, the C2 is adjacent. The R4 is right adjacent. There's new parcel, so it's entirely consistent. And if approved by the council, development plan review for the two structures on this lot.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
In the little sketch that we have here, there's a proposed new lot line. It's not the intent to split the lot. Is that correct?
Well,
In here on this.
it is. The lot would be split so that there would be two-family house on each lot.
And each lot would be changed to an R4.
R4, correct.
No, I thought it was two on one lot. This is not subdivision.
The two-family houses.
Right.
Right,
On one
but
lot
we
though.
are
not
not
two
looking at
lots.
subdividing.
It's a single lot with two houses.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. So,
We're just looking at rezoning.
You're looking at, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, you're
Yes.
you're looking at rezoning. So there, in this particular case, it does appear that they're depicting two lots. That's not the existing condition. They could do that. If they wanted to, they'd have to come back with a minor subdivision.
Right.
Or they could actually put two houses on one lot in the R4 zone. It's up to them as to how they do it. But again, if they want to build as depicted, which appears as if there would be two lots, they're showing lot 1 and lot 2, that would require a minor subdivision and they'd have to come back for that.
What is this?
Go ahead.
What is the size of those lots? I don't-
So this gets at.
Right, I'm sorry, of the full lot, and I'm just wondering what it would look like if it was split even.
This gets at the reason, the primary reason they'd be coming in for this zoning change is because these lots would each be on the order of 3,200 to 3,400 square feet each. That's smaller than the minimum lot size in R3, but it meets the minimum lot size for R4.
And that's why I
So
thought
if
lot
they-
two. Okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's like lot two, it looks like 3,300, but lot one must not be correct, because it's showing like, is that 3 or 1?
34.
Oh, it's a 3. Looks like
But they're not
1,400. okay.
asking for.
They're not asking for that because R4, they'd be allowed to build two family dwelling units on the same lot.
Right.
Okay. And this is only, we're only looking at the recommendation for the zone change that is a referral for city council today.
correct.
Right, but if I'm right, if they were gonna sell one of these houses, they would
They
have
would-
to split the lot.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to sell one without subdividing the lot.
And we'd have to come back before you to accomplish that.
And Bob,
As a minor
I know the
subdivision.
lots are small and the setback requirements are different under R4.
The setback requirements, so they're a little bit flexible if the lot size, with lot size, so you're required to have 25% of your, you're required to have a 25% of the lot depth as your rear setback. These lots are 30, looks like it's about 34 feet deep. So the setback in that case would whatever
7 feet, 6.5, 7 feet.
so what they're depicting here, I think, is just sort of conceptual. It's not, I don't think it's not for zoning compliance purposes.
Right.
Frankly, I haven't done a zoning analysis of these plans to determine whether they conform or not, because that's not what's in front of you. What's in front of you is whether it would be appropriate to change this to R4.
Right, so let me just address that a little bit. So we had originally, this plan was presented, and I think the better approach was to do R4 as even though we had this plan ahead of us, the better approach is to have this R4 to allow what we want to do. We may not divide the lots, but it allows for the number of units to be constructed on the lot.
Any other question? Good, okay. With that, Bob, would you like to read the staff report?
Sure. So, again, with the zoning change, this is the recommendation to the city council. You need to make findings relative to the comprehensive plan and to the purposes of zoning. So this is an area that is intended for medium density residential development. That's an area that the comprehensive plan describes as one that is characterized by 1, 2, 3, and multifamily dwellings. Therefore, the change to R4 would be consistent with the plan. This would enable development of more housing, which would be consistent with objective H2 of the comprehensive plan. And it would also be within the purposes of zoning, as it's not expected to affect the health and safety and welfare of the community. And so therefore, we recommend that you advise the council to change this zoning from R3 to R4.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Is there anyone? All right, this is a public hearing, so we will open it up to public comment at this time. Is there anyone here in the audience who would like to speak on this matter, or is there anyone at home who would like to comment? If you're joining us virtually, please raise your virtual hand or press star 9 to be recognized. Mr. Dolgarian.
A couple of questions. I gotta go over there.
Part of our hybrid meeting process. Everyone has to be.
Part of my happy life. Frank Dolgarian. First of all, I want to commend the proposal. I love 2 and 3 family homes, and this is two family homes. And so it seems like in terms of density, it's consistent because 200 times 36 by my understanding is 7,200 square feet. And so if even if you're going to divide it in half, and then the square footage per dwelling unit under R3 would seem to be consistent with what is being proposed. So if that's the case, why do we need to change it to R4?
It's in order to have more than one.
Is that your only question?
Well, depending on the answer, then I might have a follow-up question. I don't know.
It's not a back and forth. You know this. We've been over this numerous times. So you state your questions, then we answer the questions after the end of public comment.
Okay. And is there going to be any parking provided for these dwelling units? And so I guess those are my 2 questions.
Okay.
And
Thank you, Mr. Dolgan.
Mr. Chair, I can answer those questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Azar.
All right, so the answer to the second question is that they will be required to provide 1 parking space per dwelling unit for each of the 2 houses. So 2 parking spaces per house if they choose to build 2 houses on the property. With respect to the development, it's possible to get 4 units on this site. Actually, let me do a quick calculation here. In the R3 zone, they have 6,811 according to our map. I think that number might be a little off, but you're required to have 1,650 square feet per dwelling unit. So you could get 4 units on this lot, but you would have to do it in attached row houses, side by side units. In order to get 2 separate structures, they would be on lots that are undersized for the R3 zone. So that would not be possible without some sort of zoning relief. And in this case, we consider a zoning change to be best practice, because I think zoning relief would be hard to demonstrate that you suffer a hardship. So, I think given the size of this lot, given its location, its proximity to another R4 zone, the fact that they want to do 2 separate structures, R4 makes the most sense.
Thank you, Bob. Is there anyone else here in the audience, either in person or in the virtual world, that would like to speak on this agenda item? And there's no one else left in the virtual audience, so that's a no. All right, with that, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. This one seems pretty straightforward as far as they go.
So I'll make a motion then to make a positive recommendation to the city council to approve the change from an R3 to R4. So.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. We have a fully formed motion on the table. Go around with a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Miguel?
Aye.
And I vote aye. All right, moving right along. Agenda items number 5 and 6 are both the same applicant. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to recuse myself from this item and both 5 and 6, and therefore we will not have a quorum. So we cannot hear this item. So we will have to continue this item to the July 18th, 2023 meeting. So with that, we just need a motion and a second and a vote, and we can continue it.
Motion to continue.
Second.
So we have a fully formed motion. We'll go around and we'll take a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Miguel?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And I apologize to the applicant and his representative for not realizing the conflict
you.
until today. It was a very recent one.
Just for the record, so that it's clear, there was advertising for this, so that there'll be no further advertising. It's announced at this meeting that it will be heard on July 8th.
I believe that's the case, Bob. You can confirm, but since we're continuing it to a date specific of July 18th, I don't believe he needs to do any further notification.
That's the case, although I'm not sure this was advertised. If you bear with me, it's a land development, it's a minor land development project with a zoning change. It does not have unified development review. So I don't believe it's required to be noticed to abutters or in the newspaper, but even if it was, continuing it to a date certain would eliminate any need to advertise further.
Agreed. Thank you. Again, our apologies.
Thank you.
Next month, we anticipate having more board members present as well. So that should help these quorum issues that we continue to have. All right, so that brings us right along to agenda item number 7, which is case number 23-035 MI 25 Sybaris Street. The applicant is Kyle Bell. Bob, would you like to key this one up?
Sure. This is a subdivision of one large lot. It's in the R2 zoning district. And the proposal is to separate this into 2 lots of a little over 5,600 square feet and a little over 5,100 square feet. And these lots would be conforming within the R2 zone. So I think we can hear from the applicant.
And the applicant, I believe, is here. Can you please state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Kyle Bell, 903 Providence Place.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just plan on, excuse me, I just plan on separating the lots and to just add in a 2-family on lot B.
On lot B, which and I'm assuming that the little jog is to create the lot size required for both A and B.
Yeah, we had to get the setbacks. So that's how I had to jog the lot.
Okay. Commissioners, questions for the applicant?
You
sure, Noel?
You're
Old now,
proposing to build a 2-family house on the new lot. Yeah, just reviewing the details quickly, but
okay,
I'm good.
All right. All right, with that, we'll hear the staff report from Bob.
Okay, thank you. So this is a piece of property that's located in an area the future land use map designates for low density residential development. That more or less corresponds to the R2 zoning district. And this says it's for development of 1 to 2 unit structures on separate lots. This subdivision is for that purpose exactly. It's compliant with the zoning ordinance in that these lots will both have a minimum lot area of 5,000 square feet and 50 feet of lot width. You're right, Mr. Chair, that the lot lines are jogged a little bit so that they can meet the appropriate setback from the existing house while still providing enough lot area on the newly developable lot. One situation out there today is that once these lots are subdivided, lot A would exceed the allowable amount of total impervious surface because there's a fair amount of paving on that property. So the applicant would be required to remediate that condition by removing the paving and replacing it with pervious surfaces. So that would have to be reflected on the final plan. We don't expect any significant negative environmental impact. These will be 2 buildable lots, and they will both have adequate street access. So the recommendation is that you vote to approve the preliminary plan, finding it in conformance with zoning and the comprehensive plan with the following conditions. 1, the applicant shall meet the impervious surface coverage limit requirement on the new lot by removing excess paving. 2, the final plan shall indicate conformance with the canopy coverage requirement. 3, the validity of the preliminary plan should be extended to 1 year from the date of recording. This has been requested by the applicant in writing. And then finally, final plan approval should be delegated to DPD staff.
Just one question for you, Bob. Should we have in the recommendation for number 1 that will be shown on the final plan to be recorded?
Yes.
Okay. We'll add that language in. Reflected on final plan, and I assume the applicant's in agreement with removal of the asphalt to come in compliance
Yeah,
with that.
I already talked to Shoei with that.
Perfect, thank you. All right, with that, we have heard the staff report. We will open it up to public comment. This is a public meeting. Is there anyone in our audience here today? I don't know if anyone else has joined our virtual party here, but I don't believe so. Still none. So is there anyone here in the audience today who would like to speak on this matter? All right, seeing none, close the public comment portion of this agenda item. It's pretty straightforward.
Straightforward to me.
Yeah. The only question I had was on the diagram. Usually when there's a structure to be removed as part of the conditions, it shows that on the diagram, but not in the conditions, the removal of the patio.
Well,
Is
there's
that something that has to be put in there, or
the patio.
it's right by the line?
Oh, it says existing patio
to be removed.
And then I think the final plan, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but the existing patio will be shown to be removed. We will be showing the conformance with canopy coverage on the final plan, and then the removal of the existing pavement on the final plan too. Is that the intention, Bob?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Right, so it's listed in condition number 1 of the recommendations. It's not specified that the patio will be removed, but it will be coming into conformance. The applicant shall meet the impervious surface coverage limit.
That's
On the findings, you mean, okay.
And that'll be reflected on the final plan. We added to be reflected on the final plan to both 1 and 2, basically. Make sure you note that down. And that way we can say so moved.
So moved.
All right. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. We have a second. We have a fully formed motion on the table. We'll go around with a voice vote. Noel.
Aye.
Will.
Aye.
Miguel.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Good luck, sir.
Thank you.
And we are on to our last agenda item of the evening. It's agenda item number 8. It's a minor land development project. Case number 23-036 MI. It's 547 Chalkstone Avenue. Bob, would you like to tee this up? The applicant's taking a seat.
Yes, this, I think, is a really good example of high-density infill development. This is a parcel of land that has long been vacant. It's in the C2 zoning district. It's in the vicinity of where Chalkstone intersects Smith Street. It's a relatively small lot, but the applicant has designed a 12-unit, 4-story building. And it is fully compliant with the zoning ordinance. They're not asking for any additional height. They're not asking for any waivers. They're on a lot that's smaller than 10,000 square feet. Therefore, no parking is required. I commend the applicant for working with us. We've gone through a couple of design iterations on this to kind of tweak it a little bit. And I think what you have before you is a really nice, relatively modest building, but it serves an excellent purpose of providing a lot of housing.
Great. Thank you, Bob. The applicant is here. Would you like to state your name and address for the record, please? And then
Wilbur Abreu, Rio Housing LLC, 129 Oakland Ave, Providence.
thank you. Anything else you want to add to the?
Yeah, just trying to address the housing crisis. I control that lot. And I know that in the lot next to it, have been proposed another 8 units, which be in compliance too, but just the overall gorgeous building on an empty area. There's much need of a housing. So I will ask you guys the board and to approve it.
Okay. And Bob, the lot next door is not going to be coming before us, correct? It's under 10 units and
That's
same
right.
size lot, I assume.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's
It'll be
right.
8 units.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. All right, commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
So I just noticed one thing on the design. So it's lower than the allowed maximum of 45 feet, is that right? And there's
41 feet,
so
and he's
41
not
feet.
asking for an extra story.
I understand. My comment was on the design, there's two floors that are a little bit short. And I don't know if that was the intent, was to keep them under the maximum height. 7'9", about this high when you walk through it.
Let the applicant speak to that.
Even with that, the reason why is like that is because we doing a 2x10 construction, 2x10 framing. And even with that height, we still have 4 feet to play with it because the total height will be 45 feet. So
Right, I was just saying that the height of those 2 floors are at 4'9". A little bit short. It could be taller, but it's really nothing to do with approval or not, because you're under the height requirement.
Okay.
I was just saying you could probably add another 6 inches to the building. Make it a little bit more
He's a
comfortable.
builder, he's around this a lot, so.
it can be done. We can do it.
He's giving you some
fact,
helpful
they're-
advice.
In fact, they're entitled to go to 50 feet in this zone in C2.
Oh, 50.
Yeah, so they've got several feet to play with.
You could add 2 feet to each floor. They'd feel,
7'9" is uncomfortable.
We can do that. We can definitely.
Noel is a builder and he's also tall.
Yeah, I can have the architect do another round on it and propose the final stages with the permit with a higher ceiling.
If you want to.
It's up to you. It's
No.
not going to be a condition. It's just, helpful recommendation.
Okay.
Commissioners, any other feedback or comments to the applicant?
Actually, it's a very nice design, I think.
I agree.
Thank you.
One of the things we've seen.
I have to say, Bob kind of nailed it on the head here. This is exactly what we're hoping to have more of is modest infill housing. I applaud you for working with the staff and in refining the design. We never know what it looks like when you first bring it in. We only get to see the finished product after you and Bob and Choyan keep going back and forth and making it better. And
We
Alexis,
go back and forth.
yeah, we have great staff support here, and I don't think it's always appreciated. So I just want to state that it is appreciated on our behalf.
Thank you.
All right. I guess with that, there are no other questions of the applicant. We'll hear the staff report and then we'll open it up to public comment. Thank you.
Okay, so to the findings that you're required to make, this is in an area that the comprehensive plan calls neighborhood commercial and mixed use. This encourages multifamily housing. So that's certainly consistent. As I stated, it's consistent with the zoning ordinance. C2 allows multifamily. They're within the dimensional requirements of the zone. One thing I would say on the height, so if you want to add a condition at the end of this that says that you would encourage the applicant to design the building to utilize more of the height available, just so that we have that flexibility in there when it comes to final plan. You can do that.
Yeah, if we did that, you wouldn't have to come back in front of us if you decided to make it higher than what's shown here today. So I think that's not a bad idea, Bob.
Appreciate it.
Right. Environmental impact, we don't expect any significant negative environmental impacts. This is clearly a buildable lot with adequate vehicular and pedestrian street access. So we recommend that you approve the preliminary plan subject to the following conditions. One, the validity of the preliminary plan should be extended to 1 year from the 90-day expiration of the recorded approval letter for which the applicant has submitted a written request. Two, the applicant shall meet the canopy coverage requirement under the supervision of the city forester. Three, final plan approval should be delegated to DPD staff. And I would add a number 4 that says that any changes to the height of the building shall remain within the 50-foot height limit of the C2 zone and shall be subject to review and approval by staff.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, this is a public hearing, so we will open this up to public comment. I don't believe anyone else has joined us on the interwebs. We'll just confirm. And sir, we'll have you take a seat over here. I think we only have, no one else has joined us, so we have one person in the audience here today who would like to speak. Mr. Dalgarian.
Good evening, Grant Dalgarian. I was not planning on speaking because I was thoroughly in favor of the proposal. But based on the discussion and conversation, I just want to add my perspective. For the longest period of time, the height dimension was 3 stories not to exceed 45 feet. It's only this last time that we changed our zoning ordinance that the argument was, well, 45 feet, you can really fit in 4 stories, so let's make it 4 stories. And then all of a sudden at the last minute, they ramped up the number of feet from 45 to 50. Ink wasn't dry on the zoning ordinance and people started coming in for taller. I like 3 stories not to exceed 45 feet. That's a nice human scale. And if you look at the rest of this neighborhood, it's 3-family houses up and down the street, some 2, occasional 1, but mostly 3. And so at 41 feet, this is the tallest building out there. If he wants to go to 45 feet because he wants to add a couple of feet to each of the top 2 floors to accommodate your height, fine, but I would be not excited about the idea of going any taller than 45. So I just wanted to express that perspective to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else in the public here today who would like to speak on this matter? All right, and with that, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. I think to Mr. Bulgarian's point, the applicant's only coming in for 41 feet. I don't see him going super high. But he is allowed to. And again, we hear every meeting and we know in our daily lives that there is a housing crisis. And this is a much needed infill residential development, not asking for any relief whatsoever. And he's worked with the planning staff to make it a project that we would like to see in the city. So I commend the applicant and I look forward to approving this project with us this evening. So we are on to deliberations and discussions and decisions.
I'm good.
Then if everyone's good, it's time to make a motion.
So can we wordsmith again? We're gonna add a 4th condition, not encouraging.
It's not encouraging. Liv, did you jot it down?
Yeah, the words that Bob used.
Which I
were,
liked.
Any changes to the height of the building shall remain within the 50-foot height limit of the C2 zone and shall be subject to review by staff.
Okay, so that says that they can play within the 50 feet.
Within the 50 feet, they're
and it's
allowed by zone.
Right, it's already allowed, so they don't have to come back to your point earlier.
Exactly. So if they make it
Yep.
43, 44 feet,
Mhm.
they don't have to come back to us because they've changed from their plan. There's no ambiguity there.
Perfect.
Someone could say so moved.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? All right, we have a second. We'll go around. We have a fully formed motion. We'll go around with a voice vote. Noel.
Aye.
Will.
Aye.
Miguel.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Good luck, sir. Good luck. We look forward to seeing that housing built.
Oh, yeah. We'll have it.
That's great to know. Thank you. And that is our last agenda item. So with that, we need a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Right. Thank you. Good evening.